So, I'm so sorry I was away for a few weeks. I got COVID. I lost my voice. Thank you so much for all the nice comments and like asking where I am. Um, I wasn't okay, to be honest. But here I am. And you know why? Because I just watched the 7th episode. And my God, let me tell you something. It wasn't the episode itself that kind of got me out of the bed. I watched some of the commentary videos, you know, the ones with like exaggerated thumbnails and like grown ass men shouting for an hour about the episode. In one of the comments, they said that Hellbound dude is for sure Sauron because he's riding with Galadriel to the Elfland, and that's how he enters Elfland. And you know what? I was like, oh hell no! So I just peeled myself off of the bed, got my energy drink, and I'm gonna make a video about Sauron. Hi, my name is then at this point we are kind of like hate watching the series The Rings of Power. We're just sitting there like, oh, I hate you guys so much, and then we go and watch the angry YouTube videos about it. That doesn't sound very healthy, does it? So I want to talk about Sauron. Okay, they're not gonna do my homeboy dirty. He's hands down my favorite villain, and I think it's important to know his background because in the Peter Jackson movies, we really didn't see him in his, full glorious days. So yeah, kind of spoiler alerts for Rings of Power. I'm not sure if they're gonna follow the books anyways, but maybe kinda spoiler alerts. I don't know. And apologize for my voice because I'm still recovering from COVID. So enjoy. I mean, so far we had some like candidates for Sauron. For a while, they were like, "Oh, look at him! Looking at smithing stuff, and oh, look at him forging stuff." And then, "Oh, is that Sauron?" But like, nah, just a random character. You have no idea who he is.
She doesn't even go here.
Right now, to be honest, I kind of feel like Disa can be a good candidate as well. Like her speech in the recent episode was kind of evil, and her eyes, it's the eyes, man. I'm telling you that those contact lenses are not doing anything for the character. Sauron seemed more like an idea and personification of evil in The Lord of the Rings, and he was mentioned as the necromancer in The Hobbit before he was given a solid backstory. When I was researching for this video, most of the research papers and studies were revolving around how Galadriel is the image of Virgin Mary, or how Gandalf, Aragorn, and Frodo are the Holy Trinity. But no one talked about the most obvious link between Sauron and the most deceiving creation in the history, Satan. I think it's important to talk about an author's background, where they come from, how do they grow up. An author's own life experience also contributes to their writing. J.R.R. Tolkien was a devout Roman Catholic from boyhood, and he described The Lord of the Rings in particular as a fundamentally religious and Catholic work. While he insisted it was not an allegory, it contained numerous themes from Christian theology. Yet nowhere in its page is there any mention of religion directly, let alone of the Catholic Church, Christ, or even God. Tolkien's hobbits have no religious practices or cult of prayer, sacrifice, or corporate worship. There is no sign of those things. To make matters more difficult, Tolkien was equally emphatic that the Lord of the Rings were not to be understood allegorically. In fact, Tolkien was famously hostile to allegory in general, dislikes even the allegorical children's story of his friend and fellow Christian C.S. Lewis, the writer of the Chronicles of Narnia. How then can The Lord of the Rings be in any sense described as a fundamentally Catholic work or even a religious one? Here Tolkien does name the creator god of Middle-earth, Eru, the One, also called Iluvatar, or All-Father, as well as the mighty spirit Melkor, who rebelled against Eru and went into darkness. We also learn that Sauron, maker of the One Ring, is himself an agent of this Melkor. Tolkien thus established a direct relationship between the theistic, even Judeo-Christian cosmology of the Silmarillion and the War of the One Ring recounted in The Lord of the Rings. The Judeo-Christian conception of creation and the fall, and of the preeminence of good and evil, is an important theme not only in the Silmarillion but also in The Lord of the Rings, where we find evil in Middle-earth depicted as corruption and distortion of prior and fundamental goodness. In particular, just as Melkor and Sauron are fallen, Ainur or angelic beings, the evil creatures and races of Middle-earth are always corrupted or distorted versions of good ones. These themes are deeply rooted in Christianity but not necessarily shoves it down your throat. Now, I know most people mix up Morgoth and Sauron, but they had a lot of differences. Morgoth was far more powerful, but completely psychotic. Like, he was the agent of chaos, to be honest, and he just wanted complete destruction. Sauron, on the other hand, was far less powerful, but far more patient, focused, and cunning. I've seen him compared to Mammon. I don't think we can connect Sauron directly to Lucifer. I guess Morgoth was the one who represented Lucifer better as a fallen one. Morgoth was the first one who rebelled against his maker. Sauron didn't really rebel against Morgoth. He just kind of used him to get into his, plans and ambition. Sauron was a Maya. Maya are spirits created to help Valar first shape the world. Later on, 5 of them became incarnated wizards, like Saruman and Gandalf. The way Tolkien plays with characters' names are very important. For instance, Sauron was known as Myron in the First Age, which meant admirable and the excellent one. He was the mightiest Maya of the Valar Aule, the smith, and this is where he learned craftsmanship. He was known for his gaze, and of course the fiery eye description came on later, but his eyes were definitely his best features. As Maya's hold different powers, his was disguise. Throughout the story, he manages to shapeshift to werewolf, serpent, vampire, yes, we do have vampires in Talking, elf, and many other disguises. This is why he always wore his helmet during wars, to keep his identity as hidden as possible, which the armor in Peter Jackson movie was just badass. I love that armor so much. There is a bit of a vagueness when it comes to his fall. He was known as the perfectionist and hated everything wasteful. Sure, okay, not sure how he saw perfection in orcs later on. But during the rise and fall of Melkor, later known as Morgoth, Myron saw in Melkor the will and power that would help him achieve his personal ends quicker than if he pursued them alone. So he joined his forces and later became chief agent. He fought a lot of wars for Morgoth, which one of the most important ones during the First Age was against elves, which ended with him conquering the Isle of Tol Sirion, which later was known as the Isle of Werewolves, because he was the lord of werewolves first. During the Second Age, after remaining hidden and dormant for 5 centuries, Sauron began revealing himself once more, and by SA 100 had gathered power and established himself in the land of Mordor, in eastern Middle-earth, and began building the dreaded Barad-dûr near Mount Doom. Soon, massive armies of orcs, trolls, and other creatures from the days of Morgoth were raised, and Sauron corrupted the hearts of certain nations of men, such as Easterlings and Haradrim, with delusions of power and wealth. Although Sauron knew that men were easier to sway, he sought to bring the elves into his service first, which I think it shows his arrogance. I don't think this was the smartest move from him, to be honest. But he knew they were far more powerful. But about SA 1500, Sauron put on a fair disguise and called himself Anatar, the Lord of Gifts. He befriended the elf smitten of Eregin, including
Celebrimbor.
and taught them a lot of craftsmanship and counseled them in arts and magic. But it's important to point out that not all the elves trusted him, particularly Lady Galadriel. She just looked at him and was like, nope, you're evil. I do not want to be around you. Gil-galad, High King of the Noldor, didn't trust him either, and they kept their distance from him. To the elves who listened, Sauron gave knowledge and encouragement in forging the Rings of Power, while he forged the One Ring in secret to rule the Elvish rings. So the One Ring has black speech inscriptions on it, which it roughly translates to one ring to rule them all, one ring to find them, one ring to bring them all, and in the darkness bind them. Something about black speech that I want to say. Remember that very famous line that a lot of Tolkien fans were writing in protest for Amazon series? The one that said, evil never creates but corrupts what is made, or something like that. Well, to be honest, Tolkien himself never said this directly, but he always implied it in his writing. For example, black speech is taken from Elvish, and it was the language that Sauron used to communicate with his orcs. However, Sauron failed to communicate with this language, and I think this is the best insult that a language nerd like Tolkien can give someone. And it's related to usage of language. Orcs themselves were made out of tortured and twisted elves. So yes, in a way, Tolkien always implied that evil cannot create, but they can only corrupt things. Anyways, so when Sauron forged the One Ring, and as soon as he put it on, the elves sensed his treachery and removed their rings and hid them. Enraged, Sauron came against them in open war and demanded that all the rings of power should be given to him. Elves managed to hide the 3 greatest of the rings from him, but the other 16 rings of power were either captured by Sauron, destroyed, or lost. He gave 7 of the rings to dwarves, but to men he had given 9, knowing that they would be the easiest to corrupt. The dwarf lords who received the rings proved to be very resistant to their power, and neither faded nor became slave to Sauron's will. The rings, however, created in them an insatiable lust for gold, which ultimately caused a great deal of grief for the dwarfs. As Sauron predicted, the 9 men were all corrupted by the rings and became the Nazgûl, Sauron's deadliest and cruelest servants. And he successfully corrupted men at that time. In this era during which he marshaled and commanded great armies, Sauron became known as the Dark Lord of Mordor, and his fortress Barad-dûr was completed in the 1600s. He was very powerful even without controlling the elves, and conquered nearly all of the Middle-earth during the War of the Elves and Sauron. However, the armies of the King of Numenor were able to defeat him during the Battle of the Gathlo in the 1700s. Defeated but not wholly vanished, Sauron retreated back to Mordor and began rebuilding his strength over the many centuries. Towards the end of the Second Age, Sauron was once again powerful enough to raise again large armies to attempt to rule Middle-earth. So this part of the history is very interesting for me because he was kind of on top, but he wanted to get into Numenor. So to his orcs, he was like, peace out, I'm gonna go corrupt these guys over here and I'll be back later. He got captured as a hostage and he was taken to Numenor. After only a few short years in Numenor, he grew from captive to the king's most trusted advisor. Drawing under fear of death, he converted many Numenors to the worship of Morgoth, saying that Morgoth had the power to save them from mortality. As his power and influence reached its peak, he raised a great temple in which he performed human sacrifices to Morgoth. Finally, he convinced Ar-Pharazôn to rebel against the Valar and attack Valinor itself and claim it for himself. But here, Sauron's cunning overreached itself, for Eru then directly intervened. Numenor was drowned under the sea, and the great navy of Numenor was destroyed, and the army that reached Aman was buried under mountains of falling rocks and imprisoned in the caves of the Forgotten. Sauron's body was destroyed, but his spirit was not diminished, and he fled back to Mordor, bearing the ring, where he slowly rebuilt a new body and his strength. From this point on, he lost the ability to assume a fair shape and ruled now through terror and force. A new faithful Numenorians, led by Elendil, were saved from the flood, and they founded two realms in exile, Arnor and Gondor in Middle-earth. Alright, now let's see how he loses the ring. Okay, so after learning that Elendil, whom he had specially hated, had survived and was ordering a realm on his borders, Sauron after a while made war on them. He struck too soon and had not restored most of his strength, whereas the Elven king Gil-galad had increased his power in Middle-earth with his absence. Therefore, when Gil-galad allied with Elendil to create the last alliance of elves and men, and together attacked Sauron, they defeated his armies and laid siege to Barad-dûr for 7 years. Finally, Sauron himself came forth and dueled with both Elendil and Gil-galad, slaying them both single-handedly. He himself was overthrown in the process. Then Isildur, son of Elendil, took up his father's broken sword, Narsil, and used it to cut the one ring from Sauron's finger. While Sauron's physical body was destroyed, his spirit endured and fled. Well, as we know, during the Third Age, despite his defeat, Sauron was not vanished permanently. We all know that the story continues in The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Rings. Thank you so much for watching the video. By the way, this is Zuko. He's my cat. He's been nursing me back to health. I really appreciate all the support and like all the nice comments that I got from you guys. And stay tuned for my other videos. I will make more. Thank you so much and have a nice day. Bye-bye. Bye. Say bye-bye, Zuko. Bye.